This is Luke Swenson. If you do not listen to Mark of the Maker podcast, the Lord will punish you.
Hi, everybody. This is Mark Steiner, and you're listening to Mark of the Maker. We had this conversation in episode 32 with Billy Cho about his life and some brief questions at the very end about his status or experience as a new maker, relatively new maker in the industry. And we decided we wanted to explore that a little bit more. Billy had questions for us that we didn't get to, and we had a number of questions for him that we didn't get to either. So we're going to take those on and chat for a little bit, mainly focused again around new maker stuff and some things that we've been wanting to talk about and haven't spent enough time on yet. All right. And I think we have our usual panel of speakers with us. We have Mr. Tom Krein.
I'm here.
All right. And we have Mr. Michael Birch.
Of course.
And we have El Tigre Blanca, Mr. Sean Kendrick.
Rawr. Oh my.
There's some names on the screen that represent each of the people as we're recording, and Sean usually has a unique one up. Sometimes I'm not comfortable reading them online, but but this time I am. It's fine.
Sounds like a perfume your grandma gets from Kohl's.
It does, yeah, in the discount section. And back to join us here for episode 33 is Mr. Billy Cho.
I am here. Thanks for having me again.
See, now the more I think about it, I think this might be a Billy Cho angle where he was trying to be the first repeat guest on Mark of the Maker.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
I don't know.
This is a power move thing.
Yeah.
It was just weird, like
We got played.
talking about myself so much in that last episode, and I was like, oh man, I had so many questions, but this episode's so long already, and so it would just, I'd be an idiot if I didn't get the chance to ask you guys questions.
Well,
Yeah.
it seemed like we absolutely forgot about asking you all the questions we needed to ask you about being one of the newer makers as the noob that you are.
Right.
So
I was thinking I need about 4 more years until I become graduate to a regular maker, and then my professional career starts after 10 years, right?
that's right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, like I said, we're going to talk about new maker-ish kind of stuff. I expect it'll also, like most of our topics tend to, it'll kind of weave off into some other things as well, but we'll give it a start and see where it all goes. So, Michael, you want to kind of kick this thing off with a question? I know we talked about a topic last time that was of interest to everybody. We didn't get very deep into it, but
Well, we finished off the last episode kind of hitting some short little parts, and we hit tracing, or as he called it, biting my style. Little
Okay.
term we learned. So as a brand
Very
new
hip hop of you.
Yeah, thank you. So as a newer maker, kind of especially with the folders, how do you go about trying to find your own style? Was it a challenge, and how's that journey been?
It's hard, especially when you're inspired by somebody, right? Inspired by these makers or that makers to, to copy them or want to be like them. Especially when you're just starting out, you're like, oh, I'm not going to ever sell these, and things like that. And so, but yeah, I think it's really important to try to develop your own style. You don't want to have someone look at that knife and say, "Hey, is that whose knife is that? Is that a Birch?" And you're like, "No, that's a Cho." And you're like, "Oh, wait, no, that's terrible." But for me, again, it was really my hope to try to basically develop my own style, and that started just from learning from Sean. Sean was like, when I went to his house, he wasn't like, "Here, make one of my models," right? He was like, "Here's a blank piece of paper, but it'll take however long it takes, draw something, And so, and you can get inspired by certain things, like my first fixed blade, the Tanto style knife I made called the Genova was inspired by, a CQC6.
Yeah.
And so you can get inspired by it. And I would just basically, do the same thing as far as, be inspired by something and then use that as a basis to draw something that is kind of unique to you. And that's how I just kind of developed my style. And so, what I do is, again, I'm not really inspired by things that are really old. I'm inspired by things like sci-fi and fantasy and anime, and so I just go back and watch old movies or something like that, and I think, oh, that's cool. How can I incorporate that theme of a knife, of a movie, of a show, into a knife? And so I just try to, imagine lines that follow, a motorcycle on Akira, and things like that. So that's just how I come up with something. I'm sure everyone's a little bit different.
Well, I see some of your lines sort of like 80s sci-fi set design, truthfully, with some of the angular lines and stuff like that. Does any of that ever come through?
Oh, for sure. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And so, like I said, I was an 80s kid. And so 80s sci-fi, even, my logo, which I had Long Nguyen do, he was like, what do you want as far as a new logo? And I told him, hey, I want, to look like these kind of lines. And he's like, okay, I got it. It was basically 90s style sci-fi rave scene, actually. So if you imagine, they call it Wipeout. And so it was just kind of going back to what inspired me, what stuff that I like to this day, and music that I like to this day. Same thing with breakdancing and b-boying, and going back to old school hip hop music. I don't listen to new music at all, just like probably some of you guys. I don't like new rappers or anything to this day. I just I go back to the 90s, early 90s, where old school underground hip hop, they tell stories, and they don't talk about just making money or getting bitches or whatever. They talk about their struggles in life and things like that. And so I get inspired by stories like that as well. And so definitely, 80s and 90s has definitely been my inspiration, and stuff that I look back on, old comic books, old drawings in anime and manga. And so I see like a background or like a cityscape, and I say, oh, that'd be crazy to have that, that weird sci-fi theme into a knife. And so that's how I kind of draw from that. And old school, weapons I'll see in video games and stuff like that. And so
those are good ones. That's a good source. But
for sure.
I think the important part you said there was like, to go back a little, you said inspired, but not, I think some people sometimes make a career out of being inspired, when what I think you did was proper. With you took the parts you liked, made a grab bag, shook it up, and created your own style out of the pieces of that. And sometimes I hate seeing, like, when someone visits a maker's shop and then goes back making the same thing that someone's known for. It's like, it's okay to learn. It's not always okay to take, unless you, get permission and whatnot.
Right.
It's just, I think you've done it correctly there.
I think starting off too, it's just that I knew that I didn't want to copy someone, and nowadays, and I think that's a lot of that was from the, the b-boying background. And, cause again, you would just be so berated for copying someone's move. And they actually have a move called the bite move, where basically, you kind of make a mouth out of your forearms in front of your face, and you just clap your arms. It's called the biter. And so if you do a move, people walk around and point to you and do that move. It's called, and if you ever see a breakdancing movie, you see that move. That means you're being a biter. And so, yes, do that move if we go to a knife show. Yes.
Yeah.
It's just that, it's kind of insulting to the maker. I mean, someone that comes up with the original design and someone copies it, it's like, hey, I spent the time to come up with that. I spent the time to fail at making something that looks like that, or to get to that design. And so that's not really fair to the maker. That's what I kind of learned as far as early on as a breakdancer, actually. So
what about the argument that imitation is the greatest form of flattery, though?
Yeah, I mean, so that's one thing about, that's one thing about the gun industry that is kind of crazy. The gun industry, it's amazing, and but there's definitely downfalls. A lot of companies, if someone comes out with a great design for a gun part, they look into it and say, hey, how can I get past the 30% of this guy's patent to make something similar because it's selling so well? And so that's what I dislike a lot about the gun industry, and so they think it's okay, but when it comes to knife making, it's basically art. And I hate saying that because you think about guys with, bongos and black circle sunglasses, but it's like copying someone's art, and it's almost like trademark material. And so it's crazy. I had a conversation about trademark material with JB Stout on the Spyderco hole, on a folder. I was like, really? If you just put a hole on there and if you didn't pay for a license, Spyderco absolutely has a right to sue you, and they will, and it doesn't matter how many you make, it's their trademark material. And so I think every maker should, every new maker should see someone's new design or someone else's design as the same thing,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's examples that we've clearly seen where there were an entire pattern or shape that was too close, right? Too much of a copy or a clone, or the slang we're using here is a trace or a tracer, which is like, I think, a reference to the movie Chasing Amy, probably. But
it is.
But the idea that it's a copy. In other cases, I think there's design language, right? That's why that terminology exists. There's design language that's too similar, and I don't know. I know lots of makers who have had concerns and problems with this situation. And I would say 9.5 times out of 10, it's because the person that did it didn't have a conversation with them. Like, hey, I recognize that my own design is awful close to something that you did. Is this okay with you, or is it too close, or should I change it? Or here's another thing I was thinking about doing. And that's a show of respect. And I think it almost always goes a long, long way to having a productive conversation about it, rather than, biting someone's style and then, dealing with the aftermath, which sometimes can be a giant pain in the ass for everyone.
For sure. I mean, if you're known as a tracer, and knife makers, we all talk, right? We all have our own groups and we talk to each other and we always say, look at this guy copying this guy, and, and you will never, ever work with that person. You know what I mean? Like, you'll never do a collab with that person. And even if, they're your hero, they won't work with you. So that's one of the repercussions of being a tracer, and so you'll kind of be shunned by your heroes. So
Sean and I had a long talk about this one time about the whole idea of the creative process, and not to be like a devil's advocate of it, because I obviously do not advocate any of that. But I was wondering about this one day, if you don't, because there's guys that are kind of serial tracers, serial abusers of this IP stuff. And sometimes I wonder, if you're not creative enough to come up with your own stuff, maybe you're not creative enough to see what you're doing is wrong. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
And sometimes I've wondered about that. I wonder because some people act like they're absolutely clueless to it. And I wonder, well, maybe they don't see it. Maybe that's part of it, is you actually don't see what you're doing is wrong.
Right, right.
But it's hard for me not to see it.
Right. If you never got yelled at for copying somebody, you don't think it's wrong too. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Think about that.
Well, and I think Birch is going even deeper. He's going beyond that to the aspect that says there's a lot to having an eye in art, right?
Yeah.
Where you can see things. And I think people that are artists of any form, or that are very creative people, oftentimes can visualize or see things in a shape or a design or a drawing that other people don't, right? That's why I'm going to use an example that Tom's going to yell about, but that's why Tom goes to MoMA and thinks it's a sucky shithole. And other people go to MoMA and they're like brought to tears by the stuff, right? There's different perspectives on stuff, and it's not like there's
I like
a right
that.
or a wrong.
You're saying that I'm an artist, right?
You're
so I can
absolutely an
see
artist,
art
but
when I recognize it. And
but this, I think Michael's point's a really, really good one. I don't doubt that there are people that simply can't see that it's close. That's also a convenient thing to hide behind.
It is.
Right? When kind of called out on it, because it can't be comfortable to have someone call you up and say, "Hey, man, what are you doing?" Right? That's not a fun conversation for anybody to have, even if you're the person asking it, right?
Yeah.
Had it happen to me at a show. I think I've talked about that. It was the worst thing I've ever felt in my whole knife making career. Ugh.
oh yeah, I can see that.
Well, someone you caught someone copying your design.
No,
design?
I copied somebody.
Oh, wow.
I got commissioned to make a fixed blade, and someone's like, "Hey, this looks exactly like such and such," and I was like, "What are you talking about?" And sure enough, it was somebody's design that guy had me commissioned, and I was so damn embarrassed and so. I mean, I wanted to leave the show. What's that?
Angry.
I was very angry with the guy that had me commission it, but
I think in society in general, there's people who don't understand right and wrong. So why would we expect that in our microcosm of society that there's not people that understand that also?
Well,
Very true.
the bigger this business gets, the more people come into it that are in it for business. Which, yes,
Right.
we all are in it for business because it pays our bills. But we didn't come at it as, okay, this is, because if you look at like the iPhone industry, any sort of big business industry, it's all about using the same stuff and the same technology and stuff like that. And it very much is a dog eat dog sort of that 30% or whatever that percentage is to get away with, IP or whatever design patents and stuff. And they ride that line as a point of pride.
Yeah.
But we don't.
You guys didn't get into knife making for the money?
The other question I have about tracing is like, what is necessarily considered tracing? Is it maybe copying a finish? Is it copying a handle? Is it copying a blade? Is it
All the above.
how far do you take it? Both?
Yes to all those.
All of those things?
It could be,
as far as I'm concerned.
I think it could be any of those things. It's not necessarily any of those things.
Like, for
That's all
example,
how it's done.
a hamon wouldn't necessarily be considered tracing if someone does a hamon.
Hell no. That's just a
right. Right.
That's a ton of people do hamons, and it's a blade. It'd be like saying I use CPM 154, no one else can. But
Right.
if someone had like a trademark
I'm okay with that.
hamon that did like a million circles, and then someone started doing hamons just like that, it's very much you got to use your gut on it. Like Sean has a finish he does quite a bit. That's a finish that when I see it, I'm like, I think of Sean.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's part of the confusion too, right? You have to be educated in the industry in order to understand the nuance a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. But
Oh,
I think
yeah.
people they think, oh, that looks cool, I want to do that. Well, if it's if it's somebody's style, someone's doing it. I don't do a lot of chisels because people do chisels. I don't need to do chisels. There's certain stuff I kind of stay away from, and it's just out of courtesy. It has nothing to do with what is legally right or wrong, and that's where it gets frustrating. Is people are like, well, it's not illegal. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about doing something proper because it's the right thing to do, not taking what
Right.
someone else is doing. Find your own path.
Right.
We're not talking in legalities here.
Right.
Yeah. No, I think that it's a great question, Billy, because I think it's it can get extremely tricky really, really fast, right?
For
Because
sure.
one, maybe people can't see it, right? The design piece of it. Some people, like Michael said, play the legal card sometimes. And I mean, this is Birch's example is a good one where he had a customer commission. And, I think this gets to be a big issue in a situation where you're a maker and someone can send you a shape and you go build it, right? Which is what Birch
Yeah.
was doing, where someone can't get a knife from Fred Farkle. So they come to a new maker or anybody
fuck,
else who's
you said
willing
his
to make,
name.
and they, sorry, Fred, rest in peace. Where, you could end up doing something and not realizing it. I think in lots of these cases, that's probably the case as well, right? Where someone maybe unintentionally or without realizing it, bites some style and you end up with a problem. I don't think anybody expects everyone to be 100% aware of every maker on planet Earth, but I think it's how you handle it. If it does happen, that probably is as big a piece of this as anything, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But let me ask you a question. What about people doing loveless patterns? How do you guys feel about that? Because essentially is essentially exact copies, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We touched on that with David when he was on with us, David Sharp, on the loveless thing. And it's true in the slip joint side as well, right? And now we have this kind of unusual thing happening with slip joints where they've started to cross into the tactical side. And there are a lot of people, traditional, I got to carefully use that word.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people that normally would buy tactical knives starting to buy traditional knives, slip joint knives. And so some of that ownership of stuff is changing, wants to change there as well. But the entire slip joint industry is based on sharing of patterns. Right. I think Luke Swenson talked to us about that maybe during the Blade wrap-up episode.
Yeah.
So it's a really good point, Billy. And that's what makes all this even muddier is it's not only okay, it's the business. And in fact, maybe part of the apprenticing process in certain parts of the knife industry to copy a pattern, right? It's part of what you teach people. And in some other parts of the industry, it's just a commonly accepted thing and maybe like an honor if you have a pattern that other people are building, right? Like in the traditional side. And then in the tactical side where it's like, hey, motherfucker, step off.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a very different climate around it. And I think that makes it even harder.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's a Japanese loveless style maker and he gets hated on all the time because it's not an exact copy. You know what I mean? So it's like there's these standards of making a loveless style and you have to be exactly correct. You can't put your own flair or twist into it and basically get accepted by the group. It's so weird to me.
And I was trying to ask David about that during that episode, but I think we were kind of we were confusing each other because I was asking him about everyone that made Loveless back then because everyone did. Everyone from Kit Carson and Mayo and all these guys were doing Loveless style patterns, but I think he was thinking I was talking about getting to use the Loveless logo on them or whatever it was. But I was asking, what did he think about everyone using the Loveless patterns? Because I used to hear that he liked people to make his style of knives. That's the style of knife he liked. So he liked people to make them. But I don't know if that's true or not.
What I remember from the conversation with David was comments that said Bob was happy to have people build the knives and he was willing to share patterns, but usually it was part of that two-way street respect thing where people would come ask him and talk to him about it and maybe seek his advice and other stuff. And, sometimes he would say, sure, please go ahead and use the pattern. I'll send you one. And again, it all kind of goes back to that key conversation of, hey, I'm interested in your stuff or I'm doing some work and kind of working through the mutual respect thing. And I think that's true even in these things.
No, you're right. It would use the pattern. It had nothing to do with the marking. You're correct.
Right.
Confusing myself.
All right. So with all those things said, it's safe to say that this whole conversation about biting of style or tracing or whatever you want to call it is a tricky one. And I think we'll end up talking about this more because we have some other makers that we're going to chat with that I know are interested in this topic. And I think it's an important one to keep out in the open. I think our message, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our message to the community, the knife, particularly the maker community is, hey, look at your designs, a new design that you're doing and scrutinize it. And if you think you're a little close to someone's design, like, hey, Sean, I'm a little close to your Ruiner design. In my mind, reach out to the maker and say, what do you think? Is that a strange, is that a little too close or am I okay? Or what do you think? And everyone can kind of get feedback that way. And, I think that keeps it in a healthy place, right? Rather than letting it get off the rails and trying to fix it after.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
All right. So Sean, you got a question you want to ask here?
Yeah. Man, Billy, the community is getting bigger by the day, it seems. And that's got to be daunting for a new maker. What do you think a new maker needs to do to kind of set himself out of the pack and to get recognition and get, people interested in what he's doing?
Man, that's a really, really tough question. And again, I hit on it a little bit on the last episode, but I feel really fortunate because I already had a decent following from doing the gun stuff. But I think what helped me as well was just constantly improving and being with a good group of guys such as you guys. And so being a community, a knife making community, there's always subgroups, right? People who just naturally tend to draw to each other. So, a lot of us makers are friends, Birch, McGinnis, and we always talk and being part of this group and keep on getting better and better. And, it's kind of weird, but doing things like collaborations as well with other makers and that kind of really just kind of establishes you as hey, you're I guess here to stay, and here's I guess worthy enough, which is kind of a weird thing to say, to do collaborations with known makers as well. So it's kind of weird because, and it kind of feels like you're kind of riding on the coattails of other makers, but most makers don't see it as that, and so for example, doing collaborations with, I did a collaboration with JB Stout, and it was, again, I used to collect a lot of JB's knives as well. And it was just it was really cool getting to the point, or collaborating with Horton, because I used to, again, Horton was my first custom, and it was just really cool, when he's like, yeah, man, let's do a collab. And it was just like, people are like, oh, okay. So, certain collectors of Horton knives would be like, hey, who's this other guy that, used to be a collector, now he's making knives. And so this community really helps you out if you're part of it. It would be really hard to do this alone and solo without having a group of friends that are knife makers as well. And the other thing would probably be, doing the stuff that's you really have to be active on social media and kind of compete with all these other guys that, these Chinese makers that are making crazy stuff out there nowadays. We have to be really active on social media, do Facebook groups and Instagram posts, and, be really active in this community, hit the right hashtags. It's a lot of weird, crazy work, but you have to actually, first off, have something that somebody wants, have a unique, desirable style. That's my point of view, if that. So
How did
if that makes any sense.
I think the collaboration thing is a good one. It's a great way to get exposure, and I think it's an interesting way for a maker that or are friends with to kind of offer a hand, right? Whether it's a hand from actually working on a product together, or really more of like a respect thing, right? Like, hey,
Yes.
your work is good. I really like it, and I'm comfortable enough with it that I'm actually willing to put my mark on it as well. And that's a big deal. For
sure. You know what I mean? Like, working with all these makers, Jerry McGinnis, and Jerry's like, let's do a collab. So we're kind of working on something crazy because we don't want to do anything like, traditional. Because I was like, Jerry, you have nothing to gain from doing a collab from me, right? I'm like, you're already established. You make great stuff. You have nothing to gain. But he's like, it's not about just gaining stuff, it's all about, sometimes having fun. And so
Yes.
and so me and Jerry have this weird, crazy idea of a knife, and hopefully we'll make it in the future. But it's something very weird and out there. But when he came down and helped me out, to set up my CNC, we were just talking about it, and it just sounded too cool not to do. And so, but yeah, definitely, when a maker says, "Hey, let's do a collab," it's kind of like, "Hey, I endorse you," and it means the world to me. Whenever a maker that's established says, "Hey, let's do a collab."
I think some of the best work comes out that way when you get someone like new and someone old, young, old in the old, someone who's been around for a bit, working with someone who's fairly new. I think that exchange of ideas really makes for some of the best stuff, because you get someone who knows how to pull off a weird idea that you might not have seen out there before.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And
for sure.
Yeah.
So do you feel like you kind of had a leg up getting into this as sort of, I guess, a lack of a better term, sort of a legacy type of, initiation into the knife world?
I think so. And the weird thing is I hate putting this out there. I hate when people buy someone's knives just because they have a name as well. Like getting started. There's I love our special forces community and all that, but I hate when someone just buys a knife from someone because they're like a Navy SEAL or Army Ranger or stuff like that. Just because they are,
Yeah.
And so it's I did feel like I kind of had that, a little leg up from being in the gun industry as well. A lot of my first customers were people in the gun industry, but I really, as a knife maker, I was really hoping that my knife would just kind of stand up on their own, to actually provide a good product. And that's the thing. If you're, a Navy SEAL or whatever, you can get any job in the world. So, know that you have to put out good product, and so, but definitely also being part of this group, you guys would have called me out if, I was doing some stupid bullshit. And oftentimes you do, and so if you're like, hey, that cock and balls folder is not cool, so don't make that anymore, I'd be like, cool, I won't. And so so I definitely feel like having this community of friends really definitely got my foot in the door for sure.
Well, when I thought about this question, and I've thought about this before, I've often wondered I bet it's nice to get a leg up when you're in, but I bet it's also nice, if you're a guy that's starting out on Instagram or whatever, and you have no ties to the previous community or anything like that, I bet it would be a bit harder, but you also don't have any sort of stigma of, anything that's quote unquote taboo as far as what you're supposed to sell and who you're supposed to sell to and stuff like that. I think we almost have a restriction on what the customer base believes we should do or not do. And if you're new on the other way, I think it's almost probably a little bit easier sometimes. I'm sure both sides have their negatives and positives. Just something I've wondered about.
Yeah, there's definitely a funky, I think the networking thing, whether you're a collector or a maker or a dealer for that matter, the networking thing is huge, right? That's kind of, that's the light bulb that goes on once you start to get into it, is that, this is about a bunch more than just the stuff. And even if it really is, the focus is on the stuff, the networking piece of it is massive, right? There's pieces you probably would never have a chance to buy if you didn't have a bunch of contacts or friends or whatever, or a group of friends who could try to help find something for you or try to help make something happen at a show or whatever. So I think there's pieces of that sometimes can get a little weird, and maybe this is what you're referring to, Michael, where it can get a bit cliquish too, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Maybe sometimes to pretty significant levels, but in the end, I think, like Billy said, it's got to be a huge thing to be able to come into stuff and have basically a support network of people around you who are trying to see good things for you, right? Whether it's getting started or figuring out your style or figuring out a special technique that's important for the kind of knives you make. And this kind of harkens back to the USN thing, right? Where there's no question that for a lot of people, the USN was the place to be as a knife maker, right? And I think you guys have all talked about that in your own history, having your own USN subforum was like a milestone thing, right? It was part of, I'm on the scene, right? I am here if I have my own forum in there.
Very much
Paid
so.
Dues.
Yep.
So,
It was a growth thing.
But even being part of the USN, when you go to the USN gathering, you see those guys with the table full of knives, and they leave with a table full of knives. And I realized that I don't know those guys. You know what I mean? And they're kind of like loners, So I think even if you're part of the USN, you have to make friends, right? You have to be a part of a community. And even though it sounds cliquish, it ultimately just helps your career for sure, and you get good friends, right?
To a degree. There's also, I've seen out there, and I've done a lot of wandering when I should be working, on Instagram. There's guys doing absolutely fantastic without looking like they have zero knowledge of any prior community before becoming knife makers. And sometimes I think that's also could be beneficial. If you're out there on an island doing your own thing, you get to make up your own rules. And I don't mean as in like, copying and crap like that. I'm talking about just how you do your business and no worries about, oh, how is, the community going to judge me for how I do this or that. You just kind of selling and doing your own thing. And there's lots of guys that I think are doing perfectly well up there, but I bet it's also they have their own struggles and their own issues.
For sure. Yeah. I don't think you'd want to, I agree. It's an interesting thing to think about. I think it's a much more interesting from a ponder perspective to think about.
Oh yeah.
When you're already there. Right. Right. I think as that guy who
yes, very
can't
much.
figure out why he's not part of a scene of people or whatever, that's got to be incredibly frustrating too. That's got to be tough.
I think my point is sort of like the CNC thing. If you don't know what it can't do, sometimes you try things you probably shouldn't because you're not told you're not supposed to try something.
Right.
But
Yep.
What's next, guys?
I got a question for you guys, if you guys want to
Shoot.
maybe answer it. Okay. So maybe what are the secrets to longevity in this industry? There's some of you guys are making a long time, some of you guys are making a real long time. And so there's obviously, you guys seen things change, the climate change in the knife industry. And so what's the secret to making it for a long time? Because you've seen makers, come and go, even after 10 years, they just disappear. What do you do?
Ask me in 20 and I'll tell you, hopefully.
Right.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah.
I don't think there's any one thing, honestly. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm always nervous about if what I take to a show is going to sell. And, I don't know. It just seems to sneak up on you if you try not to trace, obviously, that, for our earlier conversation, but it's all about, I think it's being honest and having just open about what you do and trying to build a good product, being excited about it. If you're in it for the wrong reason, you're not going to stay in it, because if you're in it for the money, then you're probably going to move on.
Authentic is a word I really like for that, Tom, where I think you're trying to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. It's about being passionate about what you do, and trying to create the best product you can and just being honest,
That's crazy.
At least that's what I think.
You were saying how you're almost at this for almost 30 years and you still are afraid that you won't sell out, and so, wow, that's kind of crazy. So for 30 years, you still feel like you're not going to sell out. Wow.
Yeah. So I've been doing this. This is, let's see, I started in 93. So 26 years this year. Next year's 27. And it's what people want changes. I mean, and you've got to be aware of what's going on, and marketing plays into it a lot, and just building a niche. I mean, I've made my living doing fixed blades, which most people, that's a struggle. I think to be successful, you've got to not be afraid to work and put in the hours, and you got to work smart and hard. I mean, I don't think it's an easy industry to succeed at, but it's definitely possible, and there's a lot of rewards.
It's not. And I think, Tom, you've done a fantastic job of keeping your fixed blade, which is your main knife source, going through this huge folder phase that we had that lasted 10 years, that everyone wanted folders. No one wanted fixed blades, at least for me and others that weren't primary fixed blade makers. And you've kind of kept it going, which is pretty awesome.
Thanks. It's kind of weird. I've made some folders in between, but now I'm getting a folder shop set up, and we're going to be making a few more folders. The CNC's helping with that, but it's I don't know. I love fixed blades, and that goes back to the passion. It's what I'm passionate about. It's what I love to use when I go out in the field and stuff like that.
I think at some level, this is a little bit like lots of other small businesses where a real huge piece is the whole stay hungry aspect, right?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like lots of cases that we've seen where people have let this get away from them and either auger into the ground, or they just end up kind of losing interest or whatever. in lots of cases is because they either got a little on the full of themselves side of things, right? And started to outkick their coverage.
Chase secondary.
Yeah, right.
Drink their own
Or what-
Kool-Aid, man.
Drink their own Kool-Aid. Yeah, whatever, however you want to say it. There's a lot of that. And
Been some egos.
yeah, and so that seems like a huge piece of it. And, that's the same for lots of small businesses, but here, especially where a part of the business is their relationship with the maker for many, many buyers, that's even more important. It's amplified, I think, by a couple of factors.
Well, I think there's a few versions of that longevity question out there for like the new makers. If you wander around a few of the kind of smaller groups that you may not be used to, you'll see occasionally a guy be like, how do you sell this fixed blade? I can't get any of these to sell. Well, you need to look at what you're making and you look at your price. One of those two is wrong. Either the piece you're making doesn't match the price, or the piece you're making isn't matching what the buyers want. And something has to change. And if you refuse to change that, then you're not going to sell anything. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
You're not going to magically make something sell that nobody wants, because it doesn't work that way. And for the guys that are in it for a little bit longer, you need to, one, look at it like a business. That has killed more knife makers than any other thing, is not looking at it like a business. And you have to. And trust me, I am the last person to really ask about that stuff, but it's the most important part of longevity, because I do tend to think more on the art side than I do on the business side of stuff. But you have to look at a business plan. You have to look at what you're making, what it costs. You need to look at long-term stuff. And I'm talking the boring shit like Roth IRAs, max those stuff out. Look at your retirement. Look at a business plan as far as your insurance. This shit is important. You will go down in flames if you don't.
If you're not making money, you're not going to stay at it very long.
But you have to do something with that money smart too.
Right. But that's the business side, If you don't look at it as a business and run it where you do a profit, you won't stay at it.
Well, and that's, I think
you have to,
Birch is talking about the other half of it, which is,
I agree.
Yeah.
What do you do with it?
You have to do the right things to make the cash come in. And if it's really no shit going to be your livelihood, you can't treat it like cash that comes in as a hobby business.
Nope.
Right?
No.
Where I'm going to do this even if I'm not making money. No. If you have to actually pay bills and other stuff, the cash that comes in needs to be dealt with in a way that isn't, I'm going to go buy a new boat. It needs to be, I actually have to make this work from a financial perspective that has a long, long game attached to it.
And I'll be honest.
Put money like you do.
Yeah, that's
Tom,
one
you
of the,
put money back into your business.
Yeah.
It's smart.
It's one of the hard things, because in our industry, there's a lot of people that do this as a hobby, and there's no differentiating between that at the shows or anything. So this person can put 500 hours into something and sell it for the same as you, or you know what I'm saying? It's
Right.
If you're full time, it's a different game. You can't hand rub a blade that takes 10 hours and charge $50. It's like, that's an exaggeration, but you get the point. It all has to be your time is your money. And even if you're working 80 hours a week, you still need to get compensated for each one of those hours.
Right.
Or it doesn't work.
Definitely. Even with the gun industry, we were a high-end AK manufacturer, and people are like, why are you so expensive? And we're like, hey, we have about 20 to 25 hours into each gun. We have overhead. We have employees. And then they're like, well, so-and-so, he's an individual guy, and he spends, he makes it exactly perfect, and he spends 1,000 hours on this gun, and he still charges less than you. And so it's like people don't understand, that you have to, run it like a business.
And when people say that shit, I was like, why don't you buy a fucking gun from him and quit wasting my time?
Right.
Well, and as a customer, you need to look at the buyer or the buyer, or not buyers. You need to look at the makers that have these types of plans, because generally those are going to be the makers that are still around 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road. If you've got someone who's putting up high prices for no reason and just kind of like wanting to be a flash in the pan, you're not going to see that maker probably last very long. Do your homework on the makers. If they have a higher price, there could be a very good reason behind it. They could be supporting this their business to make it better, to make it have longevity, make it a business that will be around for you for many, many years. And isn't that the maker that you want to be part of, not someone who just kind of comes and goes?
And
so
don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking on part-time makers. It's just if you're going to do it full-time, long term, I'm just saying you got to run it like a business. You need to know what you got to get paid. You got to know what your materials are going to be. You need to actually have records of everything. You need to pay your taxes. That's a big one. You need to all this stuff. And it's like retirement, healthcare. That's one of the things that's really bad in our industry. You know, I'm lucky my wife provides that for me. But if she didn't, I would have to find it, because we ain't getting younger, and anymore that kind of stuff can break you. I mean, literally break you
in a heartbeat.
Oh yeah, it can. But we very much rely on a lot of the industry to take care of it, which is, we are fantastic about the community, about doing stuff for each other. And sometimes things pop up that we have no idea about, and things that are way out of our control. You know, we'll talk about an example of that later. But sometimes, a maker just kind of gets hurt, and then kind of sometimes expects the industry to take care of them. It's like, that's fine. It's great. And I love that the industry does it. But you also have to take care of yourself too. You should be, your own insurance should be your number one thing. And I feel like sometimes we don't do that.
Yeah, business insurance as well, with fires that happen in knife shops and all that, But
at the same time, as far as like longevity with like just making, I think important thing to learn is to say no. That's super important, and it took me way too long to learn that one.
For what example?
Well, when somebody wants something that you're not comfortable with and you're newer, and you're just like, well, if I do this, then maybe, it'll help me in the long run. Most of the time, if you're uncomfortable with it, it was probably a bad idea to begin with.
Or it's just a project you aren't excited about. Just say no.
Exactly.
Because it'll like just sit there and eat at you.
I did a lot of one-ofs and stuff, and sometimes I'd be like, I don't really want to make this knife. And I couldn't creatively do it anymore. So I got to the point of I cannot do the orders as a one-off every single time. It was creatively killing me, which hurt my business in the long run. And then that doesn't do any good for future knives, and I'm sure it hurt some people's feelings that I wasn't able to make them exactly some knife they had in mind. But if I'm not making knives anymore, you're not going to get it anyway.
Yeah, you're not going to get anything.
True.
Well, it's if you say yes to something you don't want to do, you feel bad forever, and the customer feels bad because it actually doesn't get done. Blah blah blah, and it just eats at you. If you just say no up front, hey, I can't do that. I'm not interested in do it. Sorry.
Yeah.
You feel bad right then.
Say it politely,
But you feel better right instantly after it, It's like,
yeah, you won't have resentment towards the customer. You won't have, and it'll be better all along. I don't know. What do you think, Sean?
Man, I don't know. You guys lost me when you was like, you got to have insurance, because that ain't something I got. And then I just started sitting here thinking like, oh yeah, I ain't got fucking insurance.
It's just, I don't know. I have to admit, a big part of that is my wife. She's very, she's a math teacher. She's good with the money and all that stuff. But I tried to be responsible with my own retirement and things like that, because there's not, I'm sure I'll be making knives till I can't work my fingers anymore. But who knows when that's going to come along. So I've got a plan for that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, man, I've said for a while, there ain't no free retirement home for old washed out knife makers. You got to plan ahead.
That kind of leads me to my next question, was like, what is the future for you guys as far as, are you guys going to go to shows for the rest of your life? Or, is the goal to be like Emerson or Hinder, to have like your own production company, or what? What's your guys' end goal?
You want all the secrets, don't you?
Yeah,
I do.
Yes, to all that.
I think you're going to hear a bunch of different answers, but we'll see.
I would love to have a Hinder type situation where I could pay to have these kind of semi-production knives made in my own shop. That would be a dream. And I think this goes along with your longevity thing. I think diversifying what you do and make is probably a very important thing in this day and age, because there are so many knives out there, so many revenues and different ways to lose or make money, that you need to kind of spread it out some. And like Tom said, we're not getting any younger. Our fingers aren't going to hand rub and do all this forever. So, I actually was looking at doing overseas production stuff, which, I asked about it, obviously got some flack about it, and it was something I never thought about doing. But I started wondering about all these new collectors that are out there that have no idea who I am. And that's my fault. That's something I need to fix myself. I don't make enough knives to get them in all these hands and get them to these dealers and get them to these people that have these larger network of customers than I do. And if I want collectors down the road, custom collectors 10, 20 years from now, I need to be taking care of them now. And some of that could be more of the V4, V5 situations and some overseas productions.
When I went to Blade Show this year, I met my first mid-tech collector, which is kind of weird, and so I don't think you're doing the wrong thing by trying to hit these other markets for sure.
Yeah, more knives out there at a lower price point, and we've been sitting there watching the overseas production really kick ass the last few years. And I think, and it took me a long time to get to this point, but I think I'm going to do it, It'll have to be right, but I think if I do it right, it'll be fine. It'll, pay some bills and get me back to spending more time on customs and the stuff I want to do and get my name out there.
Yep. It's increasingly more and more important, right? To be able to provide a high quality price point knife that gets your, this is going to sound funny for guys that make customs that are hard to come by, right? But to get your foot in the door or keep your name in the mouth of people that you hope will grow into buyers that are going to buy your custom stuff in the future, right?
Well, yeah, we've hit on this before about how, people say, oh, people know you've been making for a while. You make good knives. They're very sought after. Maybe right now, but at what point does that go away? If I fill all the orders and stuff like that, and those guys are satisfied, did I just kind of saturate that pool and now I don't have any other customers? We've always got to be reaching out for newer customers. It's part of the growth. We need to be part of it.
It fits with that stay hungry thing that we talked about.
So how do you feel about maybe licensing your designs to U.S. companies? Well, some of them still make them in China, but, all these major companies like Spyderco, CRKT, and all that, is it not as profitable as going overseas?
No, it's awesome. But I think people have the perception that we can just ask them and they do it. It doesn't work that way. So when I brought up the idea of overseas production, they're like, just do more Spyderco. Spyderco, if you're listening, let's do them all. Let's hit it. But they're a busy company with tons. These guys get people contacting them constantly to do their designs. Yeah. They don't, they have plenty of work to do and plenty of designs they're working on. And you really have to hustle to get these guys to do what right, to do that sort of collab work. But yeah, if they want to just keep doing over and over, let's do this. I'm ready.
But didn't you already do a design with Spyderco? So don't you feel like you have your foot in the door with them, or?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Not
very
really.
much.
Okay.
But I mean, it was a design, and but it's not like, you know what I mean. Have you talked to the larger companies? And it's just kind of like, I'd love to be able to work with them, but sometimes it takes lots of time, and I look forward to working with them in the future.
Yeah.
But you've also got to keep going. You can't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. What does the future hold for me? I don't know. I mean,
what is your end goal? Still don't know.
My end goal is to not have to worry so much about everything and just not work so many hours probably. But I'm not one of those people that wants to retire. It doesn't seem really swift to me to just sit in a recliner and watch TV or whatever the hell retired people do. I love what I do. I want to keep doing it. I guess for me, right now I'm working a lot of hours. I work 60 to 80 hours at least every week. And, a lot of that time, I'm almost in production mode because I'm building knives. I've got to get orders out and this kind of thing. Right. So I think it would be nice in the future. And this is kind of where I'd like to go, is to get some more CNC and get some, production going in my shop, and then be able to do teaching. Like I've talked about this school, and build more of the stuff that I want to build instead of, 20 TK4s or whatever, at a time. So I don't know. I definitely have some ideas for some production stuff in-house. I've not been super, I don't know, my collaborations, I've not been super excited about them, and I guess they probably haven't been super excited how they've gone either. There's a lot of variables there, and when they're trying to hit their market and I'm trying to design the knife that I want to design, and somewhere there's got to be give and take, and sometimes that doesn't always work out well. So I just am to the point where I want to control all that in my own shop, and if it works, it works, and it's good on me, and if it doesn't work, then it's bad on me, but it's under my control, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah,
100%.
It kind of feels like you're like the in between a massive production company like Emerson and Hinder and a custom maker. So you're like, with having employees and all that, it seems like you're right in the sweet spot in the middle where you can control everything that you make.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm in the sweet spot yet. Right now, I do every single thing after glue up, like everything. I do the glue up, I do prep for glue up. So basically my employees are getting me parts and I'm finishing them, and I've got to get the employees where they're doing more of the finish work and I'm doing less.
I just want to get where
but it's hard
now.
Do what?
I just want to get to where you are now. Some employees.
Me too. I think all of us want to get to where Tom's at.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
No employees for
Yeah. There's their own set of headaches, and I think right now I'm in that in between where it starts. I don't know, where I think I could probably make more money just on my own right now, but we're trying to build something, so it's different, If I could outsource stuff, but we'll see. I mean, what we're doing is working, and I've got really good people working for me. No doubt. And I think we just need to keep pushing through until we get to that plateau, and we'll see.
I just can't do it all. That's where I'm stuck. I can't do it all. I can't, between the drawing, sweeping the floor and making and doing and CNC, it's too much.
No, I agree. Yeah. It's tough. Like I said, this is a tough gig, man. It's you got to be passionate about it, and I think it's important to let it happen organically too. If you try to push stuff too much, too hard, it just even gets harder because you're trying to keep so many different balls in the air. Whereas if you do it organically, it just kind of grows slowly, and your market grows with you. So that's good.
Well, organically, I don't know. I mean, maybe this is, you might think this is exaggerating, but what it looks like or feels like from the sidelines is you're doing it organically, but with a vision or plan.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, I can see that
somewhere underneath there. And I think that's critically important for any kind of business, right? Is you have to absolutely have a goal. And if you're good, a plan to get to that goal. And sure, you can let things happen the way they're going to happen in between. Probably more so if you're not so worried about the time frame, much less so if you're absolutely concerned about the time frame. And I think that's a very common challenge when a business that started out maybe as a hobby or as I like to do this, or I do it because I love it, turns into like a real business that absolutely at the end of the day has to make money, and it's got to make money on a regular time interval. right? That if you try to make that piece happen without a plan and a clear set of goals and objectives, you're either really, really lucky if it works, or right, crying in a beer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd recommend the book The E-Myth to everyone that's wanting to look at their business. It's a good book.
The E-Myth. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Because anymore, I'm just trying to buy time,
It's in Audible.
which is a strange thing.
It's in Audible.
Oh,
So you can
great.
listen to it.
So I want more time to hang with the kids and the family as they get
right.
older. And
Mhm.
that's what I'm looking to purchase now. So you got to work harder.
So what about you, Sean?
Man, I want to be more prolific on the custom end. That's one of my primary focus right now. And then eventually, who knows? I mean, I'm confident in my designs. I believe what I make is viable and useful, and I would like to get it into more people's hands and just wait and see what the future holds, man. You know me. I step out the door, and if the wind's blowing a certain way, I'll roll with it.
I like your style.
I like that answer.
Well, and I like that you're going back to school. You're not 100% rolling with the wind. I know you're saying that, but
Well, I'm setting it so my sails catch the wind. How about that?
yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Taking control of your destiny.
Yeah, man, trying to. And I got to a point like, 3 or 4 years ago, and I guess when I set out to do this, I didn't set my sights high enough, and I had accomplished everything that I was like, wow, I'd like to do that. I'd like to do that. And that shit got done. And then I was just like, well, fuck, where do we go now? What do we do now? So, yeah, I'm trying to have, loftier visions, trying to be more forward thinking. We'll see.
Good on you.
Say you're going to be using words like synergy and shit like that in no time. You like to think you're all willy-nilly, chaos, magic, and all this, but you've got plans. You've got desires.
I learned about synergy in health class.
You're
I've been
going
using
for it.
that one for a long time.
Sean's playing it cool. And
Oh, yeah.
behind him right now are a team of engineers and scientists with whiteboards and computers planning the future.
Nah.
Okay, maybe not. No, I think, the examples you brought up, Billy, are really good ones, and they come up a lot in conversations I've had with knife makers about Rick Hinder and about Ernie Emerson and kind of what they've done. And because I think they are an end goal for lots of people. And I haven't spent as much time talking to Ernie as I have to Rick. And I can say from my conversations with Rick that he kind of picked a horse and rode it for a long, long time with the XM18. But the one thing that I'll say about what he's done is the hustle is there,
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
right? And he's been working to a plan for a long, long time. And the stay hungry piece is very much there,
Yeah.
right? And so, I mean, if you've seen pictures of Rick's shop, I've had the pleasure of being in there in the newest shop several times, and it's a fantastic operation with massive, massive, massive capability. I think he's thrilled to have that, but I can guarantee you he's not sleeping on it.
No.
Yeah.
Right? The guy's got hustle and he's on his game. So I think, again, no matter what the small business is, that stuff is key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got a huge shop. It's very amazing to see. I think he's got good employees, which that's the thing that I think I have the hardest time trying to figure out. How do you find that employee that wants to just make parts and help, and get paid, and that's all? I think that's the hardest part of all.
Well, and I think if you asked Rick, he would be very quick to tell you that he didn't get any good employees. Well, maybe he did in a couple of cases, but those were go find really good employees, right?
Yeah.
Like not easy, right? Like they didn't just fall in his lap, right? He doesn't have a shop of 30 people or 35 people or whatever he's got going these days on accident.
Oh, no.
Right. That those people are picked very specifically, and sometimes in very much a go find them kind of operation, because
Mhm.
just letting people
Right.
show up doesn't work.
No.
Yeah. Well, and the hard part about being sort of where I'm at right now, it's like you can come up with the work for an employee, but it's hard to pay the employee until you come up and have them work to make.
Yeah, I would
it
love
back.
to just hire someone just to bandsaw, but if they get hurt bandsawing,
Yeah,
you
stuff
gotta
like
have to
that.
Throw them in the ditch or something.
Oh,
Make sure
God.
you finish the job.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very much a circle of sort of no win sometimes.
For sure.
So I'm just gonna have to stretch out on a limb one of these days and do it.
Yeah, Rick's at his point where he can kind of make whatever he wants. It's kind of crazy.
I'd say to a degree. I think just like, we're probably talking about things that worry other makers. I bet he has the exact same worries, but on a very higher scale of worry. The more he's got at risk, probably the more worries he has, because he's not just in charge of his family, he's in charge of lots of people's families.
Right. For sure. And I mean, he'll be the first to admit probably that he's been impacted by some of the changes that have happened in the industry as well, right? The climate has changed with a bunch of stuff. And I think he's had to work through some very interesting twists to this game where, with big capability and a big shop and a bunch of employees, you still got to figure out how to make product that customers want and, somehow make that all work with your capacity.
Yeah.
And so I think it's one kind of problem is traded for a different kind of problems. And without that hunger to get it done, I think that's where, you could run into issues, but
100%.
I don't know. It's definitely an interesting thing.
Right.
One of the things that I'm,
machines.
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, it's just gonna be a horrible joke. Mo machines, mo problems.
Oh, fact.
That's so true.
Billy, do you have other questions?
I do.
That you want to
I do.
talk about?
So, going to longevity, becoming semi full-time knife maker myself, I've noticed that knife making is not easy on your body, right? And so what are some of the things you guys do as far as health wise, like stretches or yoga or whatever you guys do, because when you're grinding knives and you look down for hours at a time and you get that hunchback going on, what are some of the tips as far as health wise making knives?
Pay attention to your posture.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously. I started noticing that I was getting a roll to my shoulders, and for the past 2 years, I've been actively working on my posture because I don't want to look like a goddamn washerwoman carrying it down to the creek.
Such a great example. You just painted a picture in my mind.
Visual example.
You painted a picture in my mind.
I think what he's saying, pay attention to everything your body's telling you, because it'll tell you when you're fucking up. And I found that, and I hate to say it, but I haven't done this in like a year, but I used to do a lot more weight stuff. And I found like the deadlifts and the squats and stuff like that were absolutely beneficial to standing all day. And doing because I used to get back pain and stuff like that. And I think it helped my posture, and I think it helped how I was standing, gave me a little more core strength to not hurt as badly. But truthfully, I ought to learn how to grind sitting down. I probably ought to learn how to grind on a jig better, because these are all things I worry about. Will I be able to freehand grind how much longer do I have, to do that sort of stuff? And I worry about these things, as I get older. And
yeah, what I noticed is I've been having back pains just from looking down, hand rubbing, looking down, grinding for hours at a time, And so
change how you're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do it
yes
now.
and no. I would say a couple things. So one, take care of your eyes, period. Get them checked. Wear safety glasses if you don't wear regular glasses, and keep good prescription glasses. I've got glasses just for grinding that are not like the progressive lenses, because when you're looking down, you're looking through the wrong part of the lens for grinding. But then, as far as you're talking about core building, I think core building is good. And weightlifting, sure. I think I was fat and out of shape for about 20 years because of just too much stuff going on. Basically, I'm trying to get back in shape now, and I've lost maybe 30 or 40 pounds. And that right there will help a lot. I think don't let yourself go like I did, Another thing that I think will really help is pay attention to what you're wearing in the shop as far as shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And even it goes so far as insoles and socks. I've been playing around with socks a little bit, because there's some socks that are actually pretty dadgum good as far as if you're on your feet all day, which, I'm often in the shop 12 plus hours a day on concrete floor. So those socks and shoes make a difference, and they wear out. So when your feet start hurting, get new ones or put new insoles in or throw your socks away, whatever. But yeah, don't, you said you start hurting when you stand at the grinder for hours and hours. So mix it up. Grind for a couple hours. Go do something for half an hour different where you're not looking down the same direction.
Right.
And then once you get a little bit of a break, go back and grind some more, listen to your body. It'll tell you what to do and what not to do.
Right. I mean, it's so easy to try to do stuff, plan for a show, and you're doing 10 knives or whatever and try to grind all the blades at one time, or whatever. And so it's kind of weird just to like trying to step away, but that's a good tip.
Well, I mean, there's other stuff you can do.
Right.
Like what? What do
you mean with the knives, right?
Well, I'm just saying you go fit clips or something, right?
Oh, okay.
Who wants to fit clips though? I'm just kidding.
That's what I'm doing right now. So.
Well, I think a lot of us fall victim to this, and I've definitely me is we started off as a hobby, but then we carry hobby equipment and hobby techniques into this business, and that's a bad idea. Mm-hmm. You start reading some of the forums of industrial workers and that type of stuff, and you'll see like, holy shit, they do things absolutely different than us because they didn't come into it as a hobby; they came into it as a business with real OSHA type issues and having a good dust collector, having good practices. Which I'm horrible at this of wearing my respirator. I need to be better at doing that and taking care of my body. So I pay attention to that stuff and take care of it now.
That's what I was going to say is that I think the makers anyway joke around all the time about PPE, personal protective equipment and whatever. And I think, like you said, there's lots of bad habits that those habits exist in industry as well. But even down to things like hearing protection, some years ago now, Michael and I were having a conversation and he said, man, I'm having like ringing in my ears and having trouble hearing certain stuff and whatever. And he went to the doctor and got checked and he's got tinnitus, right? He's starting to lose his hearing from not protecting his ears properly. And that's all real shit, right? And most of it, you can't undo it, right? Bad, evil shit that you sucked into your lungs because you didn't wear the respirator that day is going to fuck you for a long, long time, right? Mm-hmm. Birch isn't getting his hearing back. His degree of hearing loss that he's lost is gone. It doesn't grow back.
I mean, you don't got to, fucking rip it in.
Sorry.
I think that's what I heard you say.
He can't hear you.
Go for it. He can't hear you anyway.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I mean, it's true though. I mean, we joke about it, but the most expensive piece of equipment in my shop is my dust collector. It's $10,000 Donaldson Tort over there in the corner, and it's still dusty as hell in the shop. I mean, there's no getting away from the stuff.
No. And also be careful about what you're buying if you're a hobbyist or whatever, because most of the dust collection systems are built for woodworking and things like that. And we have to be very, very careful about our sparks. And even some of these industrial spark arresters, I've found talking to Alan about one that he bought.
They don't work as good.
It still didn't work for him, and that's an industrial metal.
They don't like Zerk.
That's what I've got. I don't grind Zerk, tie, or steel into mine.
Yeah.
Period.
It's crazy stuff. And invest in some of the stuff. Like I got a pair of Bose noise canceling headphones.
Yep.
One, because the earbuds were killing my ears. But I mean, it's $300 that you're going to wear every single day and help protect your hearing.
Right. I noticed.
And man, I got to hear my
podcast. Listen to books and music.
Got to hear those podcasts over the sound of the machines.
Right.
Bandsaw and thin tie, man. That's the worst.
Oh,
for sure.
Man.
All right. So one more question. I often discover that I find new tips and tricks as far as being a better maker by accident. And so I was wondering if you guys had any tips or tricks as far as knife making that you guys discovered maybe by accident that you guys use on every one of your knives now.
So I can give you a couple things that I found in the shop that help. It sounds stupid, but the extra fine tip retractable Sharpies are awesome.
Yes.
They're hard to find sometimes, but get a box of them. They're great. You can use them for layout. You can use them for riding on the blades. This is one of the tips that when I grind, I'll lay out, say I've got 10 blades. I just kind of ride on the blades, whatever the steel is. That way I don't mix them up. And then I write what step I'm at. So the first step would be the 60 grit. So I just write 60 on there. And then for me, I come back and set the plunges. So then it'd be 60/120 because I set the plunges on a 120. And then so on all the way through the steps that you do. That way, if say somebody calls, you walk away, you come back, you know exactly where you're at. You pick up where you left. There's no hesitation. There's no wondering if you did that one or not.
That's really cool, Tom. I noticed that in your daily pictures that you post in the morning. I saw grit markings, what I assumed were grit markings because they looked curiously similar to grit numbers written on the blades. And I'm like, look at that. That's a very cool idea just to keep things organized.
Just super easy and quick while I'm doing it. The pin's right there. And that way, because I've got multiple steels and, the blades are marked under the handles. But once I get the handles on, don't know. I can keep track of it in my head, but it's much easier if I just write on there. And that way I don't mistake anything.
Right,
so that works real good. The other thing, another tip I'll give you is kind of right there as far as grinding. It's my belt organization. So I've got a little system, and basically fresh belts almost never go anywhere else other than to blade grinding first. Now, the exception is like 400 aluminum oxide and stuff like that. But for me, a fresh 60 grit belt is only going on the grinder first, because that is where it's the most important, at least in my system. Sorry about the train. If you have if you have a belt that you shaped a guard on or whatever, and there's a bit out of it, when you go to grind, it can throw off your grind. It's weird, but stuff like that matters. So I'll start with a fresh 60, and I'll use it there until it's not working anymore. All my grinding belts are on one little thing, and once it's no good anymore, I move it to a different place. So that way I always know that these belts are for grinding. I have another place that, so the belts after I grind, like with a 120, when it's no good really anymore for grinding, I can use that 120. I'll break the edges on the belt, and then I use it for setting my plunges later. So I keep those belts separate also. And belts are super expensive. So anytime we can save money, it helps us out. Last tip of the day, the new Cubitron 2 60 grit belts. It's a structured abrasive, and they're pretty freaking awesome belts. I've been really impressed with them. Literally blown away. Really, they're really good. But what I found is that you can get a little $8 diamond dresser, and this is a tip that was given to me by Ben Orford, and basically use that diamond dresser on the belt, and it brings it almost to new. And that's
no way.
True story. So I just finished up a batch of Nitro V quests. I did 30 of them. And I had a couple belts that were pretty much dead. I'd ground a bunch of D2 with them, and they were dead. And I was like, I'm going to try this out. And they were grinding belts still, so they were good, but they weren't fresh. So I was getting ready to pitch them to the other station. I ground all 30 of those quests in Nitro V, which, true, it's not a great or super hard wear resistant steel, but these belts weren't grinding it. I ground all 30 of those on 2 belts that were already deemed dead, just cleaned up with the diamond dresser.
So you're talking about like the little single point diamond dresser?
No. It's like, I can send you guys a link. It's basically $8 on Amazon, and it's got, it's like a 1/2x2 or 1/2x1 3/4 inch, rectangle on a little stick, and it's got like industrial diamonds on the end, and it's literally like $8. I bought like 3 of them.
All right. I've seen those.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, just send a link to that.
Worked great. Worked great.
Well, I know Sal Monero
and literally made my belts lasted twice as long.
Wow.
Now, what'd you say about Sal, Michael?
Oh, he uses a single point like you use on your surface grinder to clear up your wheel. And he just runs it right across the belt. And he uses up to his 400s and 600 grits to get some of that kind of grit up there.
Big in, man.
No. He just like real light holds in his hand, just kind of gently gets the grit off, the dirt off. So it works pretty good for him.
Huh.
I have to dig my
But-
belts out of the dumpster now.
Well, those ceramics and stuff are meant to be like used hard, and they weren't made for knife makers. They were made to be
Right.
ran hard, fast, and the grit broken off. And I don't ever run them hard enough to break grit off and get to the new grit and all that crap. I just get the new grit that gets thrown in my face when I first turn it on, and that's about it.
Poof.
Mm-hmm.
What about pro tips from you, Michael?
I'm sitting here, been thinking of it, and as soon as he asked that, I drew a blank.
I know you use
I knew those
sanding sticks, right? To get through little areas.
Oh yeah, definitely get sanding sticks. Get all the sanding. Look through like any of the jewelers type of stuff, like Rio Grande and the what's the other one? Offrey, Tom.
Oh yeah, the watch guys.
Yeah, that's Otfry and
OFREI.
all these little sanding sticks and things that are made for like jewelry and watches are fantastic for us. You can buy these little tiny sanding sticks that have little that replaceable sanding things you buy, and you just kind of rotate it around to get new sand, and it gets in all the crevices and all the stuff.
Okay.
Little hand rubbing tip if you have a tight radius. Instead of trying to get into the radius, take a wire and run a strip of sandpaper through the wire up against your plunge. That's a fun one. But then I went to big old wide plunges, so I don't have to worry about that as much.
Okay.
One of the we talked about before was not so long ago, actually, were those little handles that you put on the blade for grinding.
Yeah, somebody's making them now. But yeah, build yourself some little handles so you're not pinching the little folder blades in your hands all the time. There's a ton of those. But yeah, drawing pretty much good blanks right now.
Man, I just keep thinking about it, and I'm thinking what I do ain't that complicated. There ain't really tricks. If I'm trying to use tricks, I fucked up, and I'm just going to make new parts.
Well, like you have a good way of surface grinding your tie and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, it works for me. I just glue it down to the table and go slow and get her flat and parallel.
You glue it to the table?
I glue it to the magnet.
Really?
The magnetic chuck on the surface grinder? Yeah.
Yeah. I use a block, so I've got a block that I ground in, and I can glue it to it and then take it off to get the part off. That way I don't have to scrape on the chuck.
Now, man,
I've been using double-sided tape.
I just use hot glue, and it lifts off, and what little bit of residue it leaves behind, acetone knocks off instantly.
Oh, you're using like a hot glue gun? Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I take and
I've been using super glue.
Ooh.
No. Oh, yeah, dude, I tried that. You're making your life way more difficult. Get the cheap, shitty glue gun from Walmart and some glue sticks, and you're good to go.
Now, if you want to use super glue, get you a metal plate that you've already surface ground and super glue to that. That way you can hit it with a brass on the back and knock it off instead of having to scrape.
Yeah, that's what I do now.
Okay. Or get double-sided tape, that Blue Hawk like Billy was talking about. It's probably the exact same stuff. Blue Hawk from Lowe's.
I do want to get some of that
fantastic.
handle material and shit for when stuff starts getting real thin.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I do Zerk on that. I use Zerk tie on that double-sided tape, and it holds. So
Yeah, it's great. Fantastic stuff. And then it just peels right up. You don't have to, there's no real residue. You can kind of wipe your hand on it and it's off.
Mm-hmm.
That works great. That was a Jerry McGinnis right there.
For sure.
I never could find good double-sided till he was telling me about that stuff.
Yep. Only Lowe's has it.
And the good Harbor Freight scissors.
No.
Oh, yeah. The McGinnis Harbor Freight scissors are like 12 inches long. Cuts right through for me, I like it for the labels. One piece of paper, just slice right through.
Mm-hmm.
But great for your heat treat oven stuff.
Mm-hmm. Big time.
Oh, yeah.
I think Billy's been to a bunch of different guys' shops as part of his experience
For
so
sure.
far, and some of the stuff that you're probably thinking of, Billy, are those things where when you go and spend the day, right, or a couple of days, there's little teeny things that don't seem like a big thing, but it's like, oh snap,
Right,
look at
yeah.
that. I don't do it like that. That's
Mhm.
smart, right? That's better than what I do.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, going to see everyone's style and then, picking up a little tip from here and there from each maker has been pretty awesome. I could add a tip on there. I actually discovered that I had these paint markers, and I used those for Damascus and etching. So what I hate about nail polish, sometimes it just takes so long for it to dry. So I use these Japanese paint markers, and you can get them really fine and thin to, do your detent tracks and stuff like that. And it dries super fast. And some of it, like the Japanese stuff, like it's hard to even come off with acetone, but it comes off with WD-40. So I've been using that for really tight spots, like doing floating backspacers. I made a Damascus, use these little paint pens that have a really fine tip on there.
Nice. I actually bought some of those, Billy, on your recommendation. I haven't done a Damascus blade yet, but I have them. I bought a few of those.
Yeah, I mean, you can do really tiny lines with it.
Yeah, I've gotten the ones from Automotive Supply, and I found that a couple work and some haven't worked for shit because Damasteel and using muriatic is real bad about getting up underneath there.
Okay.
And one of them worked really well, and then I got the exact same one, and it didn't work again for shit.
Wow. Yeah, I haven't done anything muriatic, so this only works for ferric so far, Tom. So
yeah, that's all I'm using. I've got a question for you, Billy.
Okay, shoot.
I consider you a new maker, and I think that's why we're interviewing you.
Noob.
Yeah, you're the noob. Do you feel like your collectors? Do you have like newer collectors, or do you feel like you have older collectors? And if so, what are you finding they like, and are they more design driven or materials driven, or
as far as my customer base, correct, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. I've noticed that a lot of my customers prefer plain Jane stuff. Maybe that's just what's going on in the industry, but I know a lot of times with you Birch, people want Mammoth and Damasteel and whatever. But yeah, most of my customers, they like, plain Jane micarta or all tie or, a lot of the very simple materials. It's kind of crazy. That's what people go crazy for. It's kind of weird. I like making fancy knives because, you can kind of be a little bit more artistic. But yeah, they seem to prefer more plain Jane stuff, maybe even a plain Jane with maybe a rare micarta, Westinghouse, or the new turquoise stuff. A lot of people have been digging that stuff. But as far as customer base, some of them, when I was starting early on, there used to be, a lot of people that would follow me in the gun industry. They're like, oh, I'll take a knife, whatever. I'll take a fixed blade. And nowadays, that's kind of shift where since I'm mostly making folders, most of the guys that are into my stuff have been mostly knife collector guys. And it's been diverse. It's been a lot of new collectors, some old. So it's kind of been like a mix, yeah, it's been a mix. I'm trying to think about my customer base, and yeah, it's been pretty diverse. I think some people have been, that are longtime collectors have been waiting until I got better, and so they've been holding out. And some of the old collectors have been coming out now that I got a little bit better, and so yeah, it's been pretty interesting. And I always get super honored when it's a big time collector or old school collector. They want something that I make, and it's been like, yeah, it's been a wild journey, And so, because I know these guys, some of these guys have, $20,000 knives or whatever. They collect the big time makers and stuff like that, or art knives. And when they want something from me, it's like it's been a huge honor. So
nice.
Yes.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see a little bit of a shift with respect to materials where maybe I'm off base, but there's not quite as much steam behind every knife needing to be some super Damascus, mother of pearl, Damasteel piece.
I noticed that's probably maybe like 5% of my customer base would be people that want stuff like that.
Well, good. We're getting past that a little bit.
Right. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were like, good, you're suffering too, or.
Yeah, right. Things were getting downright gaudy around town there for a while. And I think there's still lots of very, very dressed up knives, but maybe not the constant expectation of it as much as there was a year or two ago.
Chad's like, fuck you guys.
And as a collector, I really like fancy knives and art knives just because I can, appreciate the beauty of it and the work that goes into all the details. You can still have a lot of details in simple knives, but as a collector still, I just get, and a maker, I guess, I get inspired by, when people use crazy materials or go way out there or stuff that's engraved. And so that kind of does it for me.
I'm going to approach Billy to build me some straight up striped shirt, plaid pants, polka dot tie kind of thing.
Yes. You had me at polka dot.
I want at least 4 flavors of mocha tie in one night.
Hey, right, exactly. Multi-pattern.
Yes.
What so on the cost of entry side of this thing, Billy, I know you talked in the last episode about how you kind of tried to get yourself set up before you went full time, right? You didn't want to necessarily hawk the farm to make this happen if you could help it, right? I mean, you end up in that spot anyway, but and maybe you have a unique case here because some of the equipment that you buy, maybe a lot of the equipment you buy, you have multi-use for, right? Whether it's knife stuff or gun stuff, some of those tools you're going to use for both, right? There's probably a few that are specific, but the majority of the shop, I would guess, sees duty on both sides. But what do you think about the cost of entry to the whole scene? Is it different? Is it getting lower? Or I maybe that's a dumb question to ask you because you just bought a very expensive CNC machine. But in general, I guess, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, so far, I've been really lucky, and I only owe money on the CNC machine, but everything I bought out straight up. But I think maybe things are getting cheaper as far as equipment wise. Some of them, some of the new stuff out there is really expensive as far as some of the new grinders and stuff like that. But I've noticed even on Craigslist, you'll notice guys that have they make their own grinders and they sell them on Craigslist. It's kind of crazy for super cheap, and so or they sell plans to make your own grinder and stuff like that. So as far as equipment wise, I think you need to get a decent mill, and not necessarily a lathe. I guess a lathe wouldn't be really too big of a requirement to make knives. But yeah, they definitely translate to firearms as well. I mostly use the lathe for firearms, and with AK building, it's a lot more. I guess it's very similar to knife making, but the equipment I use the most for gun building would be the mill, the lathe, and the grinder to sand stuff, and a lot of it is just hand sanding and stuff like that, just like hand rubbing a blade. But as far as pricing wise, I would say it's getting cheaper and more expensive because there's grinders and stuff like that from Moen Works and stuff, Plantons and stuff like that that are just crazy expensive, and I wish I could buy it or something. But at the same time, people are coming up with their own stuff and their own materials. There's people are making micarta, and a lot more people are making micarta, and so they're trying to keep, and carbon fiber, so they're trying to keep prices more affordable, it seems like, for competition. Is that what you guys kind of noticed?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But when I think of like the cost of entry, I think of it as more of the cost of like the gamble of it. It seemed like when we were making and stuff like that, it was more of a, when someone went full time, it was like, holy shit, someone's going to go full time. It was like a big deal. It was a gamble, a big gamble. And I think it seems anymore that's been shown over and over that people can at least temporarily or for a little bit go full time and do it as a knife maker and be okay. I think there's the part of it of it's a little bit easier to hop into knife making with so much information out there as far as, whip threads that have been done past and YouTube and stuff like that. I think it's a little bit easier to kind of hop in with both feet than it used to be.
And, I do know makers that kind of did sell the farm to buy equipment, and some of them went crazy where, they would have, 3 or 4 TW90 grinders, and they didn't have the customer for that, customer base. And now they're not making knives anymore. So it's kind of, you gotta have a plan. You gotta have people that want your stuff before you kind of go crazy. And I think it's okay with having, cheaper equipment. If you could only buy a $1,000 grinder, then, then kind of go for it. But to just get your foot in the door. But selling everything to just kind of make everything work is kind of crazy to me. It's but hey, no risk, no reward sometimes, right? Because there's stories of guys who did that and they became wildly successful. But you definitely need to know what you're getting yourself into. It's really scary for me because currently my wife is a stay-at-home mom, and even getting a CNC machine, which was the only machine I owe money on, is still pretty scary because I'm not 100% proficient on there, and again, I'm the only one that's bringing in money for my family, so you got to weigh out a bunch of things, So it's I guess everyone's a little bit different, and so I would say don't go into a huge amount of debt, Some guys take out business loans and things like that. I don't know if I'd recommend that, but
that depends on their approach.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you have something to back it up with, right, then that's different. Where, like in Tom's case, if he's got a business that's making money and he has a cash flow that he can measure and that he can have some ability to control or ensure that it's in place, then I think business loan kind of stuff makes a lot more sense,
sure.
Right? It's more like you said, come at it hard from a financial perspective, buy a bunch of equipment, and then not be able to actually satisfy that cash flow requirement. That's a pickle for any small business.
Yeah. Well, I've seen a few of those that have here's a knife I drew, then I'm going to go buy a bunch of equipment and start making this. And be like, hey.
Let's put it this way. I've bought a lot of equipment for people who gave up their dreams.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean,
I think what you were.
Oh yeah.
I think what you were thinking of. You were thinking of it in terms of cost of entry, Michael, or that's the words we both use. But I think you were almost thinking more in terms of barrier to entry, right? Like information being available and other stuff. And there's kind of a weird confluence of things that have happened, right? Where the information is out there in spades, right? There's tons and tons and tons of information available. And there has been this exploding market where this may not be fair, and there are people that would cringe at saying it, but they're literally felt for a while there like, Billy could build his cock and balls knife and it would sell, right? Like there's just such a demand in the market that everything that it was out there was selling. It didn't matter if it was horse shit or good stuff or whatever, that you can kind of create this really scary situation. And I think we saw this happen with some makers where there's this super thirsty market. There's a ton of information available. They get started and maybe they're not putting out quality work, but there's a huge number of people blowing smoke up their ass about how good they are or how desirable their work is. And now you got a guy who maybe really isn't proficient yet, right? Swinging for the fences at every at bat. And now you got a problem, right?
Yeah, and also approaching it as a business as well, especially if they're not doing it as a business, it's very overwhelming.
Yeah,
very much.
So I don't know. It can put you in a spot where maybe you're a little more confident than maybe you really should be. So it seems like you have to be really careful as a new maker in the current environment there as well, right? Yeah. Not to get overconfident.
For sure.
Then you sell, what do you call it? You sell the deposits or whatever. Take deposits to get it done, to buy the machine, to make the parts. Then you find out you need more money to buy the stuff. Don't do it.
Yeah, bad business.
Right.
Taking deposits. Yes.
There's exceptions to the rule, but
I maybe take a deposit if someone wants a custom lefty, a lefty folder.
See, he had to put that disclaimer in there because of my deposit. No,
that's where you just say no. It's easier.
Right.
Yeah. Learn to say no.
Yeah.
Sorry, all you left-handed guys out there. I just threw you under the bus.
I made 17 lefty V4s.
I saw that.
On that.
I saw that.
And I put, how dare you on your Instagram.
Man, at least 50% of the Mark of the Maker cast is left-handed.
Are they?
Yeah. Suck it, righties.
Wait, who's left-handed?
Both Birch and I.
I'm left-handed.
Oh, wow. Crazy.
Devil's hand.
But you got righty folders, though.
Yeah,
Mark.
I've never.
Yeah,
I mentioned that in an early show. I've never owned a lefty folder. It's very weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is.
I mean, maybe it's not that weird because when I started to buy knives, there was no such thing, at least as far as I knew, as a lefty folder. So I always carried on the right side and came out of my pocket on the right side. That's the way I've always done it. I've never carried on the left.
Well, left-handed people get upset at me because I don't make folders, but I made some, took them to a show. They didn't sell. I was like, sorry, that's it. No more lefties.
Right.
Exactly.
If you lefties would have come and bought them, then I would maybe make some more, but no.
Yeah.
I noticed that majority of lefties prefer a righty knife. So,
With a left clip, though.
yes.
It gets weird sometimes.
Maybe.
It does.
Yeah, there's definitely some divergence in the left-handed community around that stuff. I know the first knife Michael built for me, he was like, "Oh yeah, you're left-handed too? Sure, I can build it as a lefty if you want." And I'm like, I don't think so.
No thanks.
Build it as a righty. I've never carried a left-handed knife. That'd be really weird, and it would suck to have it custom made. And then, oh my god, I can't get used to that.
Wait, so do you open your righty knife with your left hand?
Right, pull it out of my pocket, hand it to my other hand, and open it. No, it comes out of my right pocket in my right hand, and I open it with my right hand. Now, about
Nice.
half the time, it ends up in my left hand to do work, but maybe I'm a little bit ambidextrous that way. I don't know.
He's so left-handed, he tells that fucking righty what to do.
That's right.
Yeah, okay, so back in the day, it's kind of in culturally Koreans, it kind of looks bad if you're left-handed. So they would tie your left hand behind your back so you learn how to use your right hand.
Yeah.
That's what they did to my dad.
This is like in the 80s and 90s still that this would happen.
Oh, shit. This was like a long time ago.
No, it happened to a friend of mine. He was, he plays guitar and he plays right-handed and he's a lefty. And so because he had his arm tied behind his back and had to learn how to write and eat with his right hand.
Look,
Kinda messed
now
up.
look,
Pretty sadistic.
Yeah.
look, Billy Cho. As a man of left-handedness being represented on this podcast, you bring up atrocities against left-handed people.
It's the past. It's happened. It's real life, Mark.
It's real life.
Not fake news.
Yeah, I'm the same as Mark. I do some things left-handed, writing and eating, stuff like that, and a lot of other things right-handed, like I'm bi-handed or something.
All right. Did you guys have anything else that you wanted to cover here on the first ever part 2-ish thing of Mark of the Maker?
No, I'm good. That was good conversation.
No, I think Billy's talked too much.
Yeah, I'm surprised it went so long. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, we're pretty windy over here, Billy Cho.
For sure.
True.
Good thing about podcasts is, you don't have to wear any clothes when you do a podcast. So,
Yeah, right.
It's pretty freeing.
Can you see me?
I can.
That was the Marsh thing. I'm 90% sure he's stripped down buck naked halfway through. As soon as we told him there was no video, he was down.
Yes.
We record in the same room, too.
Yeah, it was so strange. I'm like, bro, put your pants back on.
Oh man, but it's been awesome, guys. Thanks for having me back on, and I think a bunch of you guys gave some great stories and tips for new makers, and so I'm constantly learning from you guys all the time, and so I appreciate your guys' help as well. Whenever I hit you up, or just rant to Birch saying I messed up, what I do. So
I'd be like, I messed up more. Don't worry about it.
So true story. One time I messaged Birch and I was like, dude, I just kept screwing up. I'm on my third blade for this knife. And the tip that he gave me, he says, don't worry, what I do, it just, I just think of the song, we built this city and replaced the lyrics to we milk these titties. And I feel better. That was his advice. And you know what? It worked. So
wow.
Now that whenever I mess up, I'm like, we milk these titties. And I cry. And so,
Oh, man.
that's Birch's advice to me.
Pro tip of the day.
Pro tip of the
I may
day.
not have good advice, but I got some good juvenile shit to send your way if you need it.
Yeah.
But you guys are awesome. You guys are doing great things for our community, and it's been an honor to be on the show twice now. So
He wanted
Appreciate
to
that.
make sure everyone heard that. Did you hear that, y'all? I've been on twice. Take
Twice.
that, Marsh. Take that, Luke Burnley.
Oh no, don't say that.
We talked earlier about the insurance and where the community comes together, and Sean wants to talk about a situation where it was needed and it is a very great thing that people have done
A great example. Yep.
to raise some money. The good side of this.
Just the very good side of it. And I got to thank everybody who pitched in to help out my niece, Sammy Orr. For those of you guys who don't know, my niece, Samantha, has cystic fibrosis, and it's pretty advanced. Her lung function isn't great, and she's in need of a double lung transplant. And one of the last hurdles she had to get through to get on the list was prove that she had enough money to do the follow-up care after the transplant. And in 2 days, the community came together and doubled what she needed to have to show that she can do the follow-up care after the transplant. And I mean, it was just an amazing thing. Everybody coming together and making this work for somebody who's so close to me. And thank you. I mean, I can't say it enough. It's humbling. It's bewildering.
It was good to see. It was really nice to see that happen. And we talk about some of the GoFundMe stuff and all this and how it gets weird, but that's a situation where that is exactly what that needed. And that's what that's for, type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we see lots of great examples of it in the community over many, many years, right? Where people come out of the woodwork and find a way to help somebody who's in real trouble or has some massive challenge in their life. And this is a great one. So,
for sure. You know, that's what I really love about the knife community as well, is just, you know, in the gun community, they'll do, you know, giant fundraisers and give it to a faceless company out there. But, you know, we really take care of our own over here. And it's so awesome to see.
Very, very true. All right. Well, I think that's it for episode 33. It might be a little short. It might be a little long. I'm not sure exactly, but we'll see how it all shakes out. As always, we thank everybody for listening. Thanks to our Patreon supporters for sticking with us and helping us keep the show rolling. And we'll talk to you next time.
Take care, folks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
To learn more about our makers, you can find Tom Crine on the web at crineknives.net, in his Facebook group, Crine Knives, or in his Instagram account, @Crine Knives. For Michael Birch, check birchtreeblades.com, Facebook group Birch Tree Blade Works, or Michael's Instagram @BirchTreeBlades. For myself and the Raygun Bead Project, we're on the web at raygundivision.com. We have a Facebook group called Raygun Division, or my personal Instagram @msteiner. For those interested in photos, references from the show, or some discussion about the show itself, you can find us on the web at markofthemaker.com, in a Facebook group called Mark of the Maker, or on our Instagram @markofthemaker. Last but not least, the ultra cool and haunting background music we use for the show is a piece called Noir Guitar by Stevie's Amp Shack, found at the Free Music Archive and licensed under Creative Commons CC BY 4.0. Thanks for listening. Facebook group Birch Tree Blade Works, or Michael's Instagram @BirchTreeBlades. For myself and the Raygun Bead Project, we're on the web at raygundivision.com. We have a Facebook group called Raygun Division, or my personal Instagram @msteiner. For those interested in photos, references from the show, or some discussion about the show itself, you can find us on the web at markofthemaker.com, in a Facebook group called Mark of the Maker, or on our Instagram @markofthemaker. Last but not least, the ultra cool and haunting background music we use for the show is a piece called Noir Guitar by Stevie's Amp Shack, found at the Free Music Archive and licensed under Creative Commons CC BY 4.0. Thanks for listening.